why in Islam. And as we discuss this topic and we continue with it, you will see it's a topic that is extremely critical, and at the same time, it is a topic that is not discussed nearly as often as it should be in our communities. There is a characteristic that every single human being alive on the face of the earth has today. There's a characteristic that is so fundamental to the human being who he is, that scholars of akhlaq, scholars of Islam will tell you this characteristic is a fitri characteristic of the human being. It is an intrinsic characteristic of the human being. You will not find a human being on the face of the earth that does not have this characteristic. Sometimes it might be hidden, but many times it's very clear. And that characteristic is a thirst and a curiosity for figuring out the reality behind the different events that we see. A thirst and a curiosity for truth and for knowledge. And this is a characteristic that only the human being has. When you look at the other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't find this characteristic in the other creation. And we'll talk about this more. But when it comes to the human being is never satisfied with you just telling him what happens. He always wants to know why. What's the reason that this happened? What's going on? What's the deeper layers of the reality behind this event? If the human being sees a natural phenomenon, for example, if the human being sees an apple falling from a tree, he's never okay with just seeing the apple fall from the tree. He wants to see, why did the apple fall from the tree? Why did it fall with this speed? Why not somewhere else? Why did it fall close to the tree, for example, and so on and so forth. Whereas the other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they see natural phenomena, and it's not a big deal for them. The human being is always asking why, always trying to get to the deeper layer of what he is witnessing, the purpose behind what he is witnessing. And similarly, when the human being sees religious phenomena, when the human being is told to pray 5 times a day, to fast, for example, to do this and to do that, the human being wants to ask why. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him to fast for 30 days or maybe 29 days, he wants to ask, why don't we know how many days we're supposed to fast exactly? He wants to ask, why do I have to pray 5 times and not 6 times, for example? Isn't praying wonderful? Why not 6 times? When I'm doing my wudu, why is it that my hand has to always go downwards? How come it can't go upwards? If it were to go upwards, the spirituality of my wudu all of a sudden is lost. You ask any marja of the Shia school of thought, it will tell you. That most parents will make when they want to explain the details of the religion of Islam to their children. And number 5, and finally, couldn't have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shared with us the wisdom behind all of the detailed teachings within Islam? Wouldn't that have made life so much easier? That if I pray 5 times a day, I know exactly why I have to pray 5 times a day. If I cannot go upwards in my wudu, I would have known why I cannot go upwards in my wudu. I could have told my non-Muslim friend, he would have been very impressed with my religion. If I were to tell him the reason behind every single one of these detailed rulings, couldn't he have shared all of these reasons with us? And therefore made our life a lot easier, made our faith in the religion a lot easier. Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Let's begin from here. We said that human beings are different from the rest of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when something happens in their life, They never have a moment of reflection. They never sit there and say, well, let's see why this happened. Let's see what we can learn from this incident that took place. And that's why for thousands of years or millions of years, the human being has always been the predominant or the dominant species on Earth. Because the human being, he asks why. And when you ask why, you get to the deeper layer of truth. This brings you knowledge. You become more dominant on Earth. The honeybee, for example, when he makes all the honey that he makes, if you come and take his honey away, never sits and says, let's see why this happened. What was the reason and the philosophy behind it? Yes? If the cows are grazing on the grass, they never sit there and say, why is this grass, for example, green? Why not purple or blue? They don't ask these questions, yes? The human being, on the other hand, is completely different. The human being is always asking why. Why did this apple fall? Why is the sky blue, for example? And then you take that and you put in front of this human being a religious teaching. You have to pray 5 times a day. You have to do wudu. When you're praying, you have to pray at a certain time. If the sun comes up, all of a sudden, a human being fundamentally always wants to ask why. What is the wisdom and what is the philosophy behind this? And so we want to see, does Islam see this as a negative thing or does Islam see this as a positive thing? This is an issue that many of our younger generation are either dealing with already, or as they get into their college years and into their adult years, they will be asking these questions, of course. When you look at Islam, unlike many other religions, you don't find that asking these questions are seen in a negative light. Maybe other religions, other ideologies, if you were to ask why, you would get the type of response that, what do you mean why? Why are you asking why? This is religion, this is faith, you just believe in it. Don't ask why. Yes. Faith is one thing they will tell you. Intellect is a different thing. Science is a different thing. These two have nothing to do with one another. What you believe with your heart and what your intellect and mind tells you are two separate things. Within Islam, that is not the case. Within Islam, these two go hand in hand with one another. And the reason why we say that Islam does not frown upon these questions is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala this question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came, he said, I am going to create a representative on earth. Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. Moment he said this, you look at the verses of the Quran, the next words of the Quran is what? قالوا أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها? You're going to put someone in there, they're going to create corruption, ويسفك الدماء, and he's going to shed blood. ونحن نسبح بحمدك ونقدس لك. We honor you, we worship you, we respect you. The angels were saying, so there's no need for this other creation of yours. Right? You don't need him. They raise this question to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And nowhere in this process where the Quran is telling us the story did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reprimand them. How dare you? Who do you think you are? Why are you sitting there and questioning what I'm doing? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't do any of this stuff. He said, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamu. He said, I know something you guys don't know about. I know the potential of this being that I am creating. And then as the story unfolds, what did he do? He actually took the time to present to them and show to them why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this human being. He brought Adam, yes? And he taught him these names. What are these names? Different mufassirin and different scholars have different opinions on this. This story of Adam in the Quran is one of the most discussed stories in all of the Quran. Because what does it mean? Adam is taught and then he knows these names and the Malaika didn't know these names. It's a lot of discussion on this. Yes, we've heard hadith here and there, yes, this is the names of, our beloved Ahlul Bayt and so on and so forth. But there are more details to the story than just that. Nonetheless, what the Quran tells us is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Adam these names. And then he asked them, the angels, to say these names. They couldn't do it. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed them that this human being has a potential. He has certain characteristics that the angels don't have, for example. And again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't reprimand them. He said, Alam aqul lakum, didn't I tell you that I know the knowledge of the heavens and the earth. وَمَا كُنْتُمْ تُبْدُونَ وَمَا تُبْدُونَ وَمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْتُمُونَ, and those things that you hide and those things that are public, I know all of it. I have ultimate knowledge. But nowhere did he sit there and say, how dare you ever ask a question like that? Why would you ever question my creation? No, this is seen almost in a positive light. What this story of the Quran demonstrates for us is that asking why in religion, at the very least, is not something that's frowned upon. This takes us the first step. Then you look at other verses of the Quran, you find other verses of the Quran take you another step. Because the Quran says the servants of Allah, those special servants of Allah, they are those that when they come across our natural phenomena, when they come across our signs, they don't fall to sajda blindly. Some people are like that. They fall to sajda blindly. Meaning what? He hasn't really understood how this is a sign. He hasn't really understood the why behind it, the philosophy behind it. He just falls to sajda. Quran says, no, our special servants, they are the ones who don't blindly fall to sajda. لَمْ يَخِرُّوا عَلَيْهَا صُمًّا وَعُمْيَانًا. Don't just blindly, they ask why. They want to get to a deeper understanding of things. So it seems as though Quran and Hadith is telling us, no, asking these whys, asking these questions is actually something that's positive, something that you and I are supposed to do. Then you look at the Seerah of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, this is exactly what you find. Because in the Seerah of the Ahlul Bayt, you find lines, in particular the Seerah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa alayhi. You find lines from him that no other companion of the Prophet ever uttered. No other companion of the Prophet has ever said the following line. The narration says, after people finally recognized him as Khalifa, actually gave him that power to rule, the narration says he came, he sat on the minbar of the masjid. And the narration says he was wearing the imamah of the Prophet. And he had with him the sword of the Prophet. And he was wearing the na'alain of the Prophet. And he sat on the minbar. The narration describes for us that even the motions that his hands were making. Then he turned to people. He said, Saluni qabla an tafqiduni. Ask me before you lose me. Not only is it okay, Ali ibn Abi Talib was asking in some ways, pleading to people, come and ask. And this is a line that no one else amongst the companions of the Prophet has ever said. Because this line, when you say it, there's only two options with regards to who you are. Either you are a genius and you are extremely knowledgeable, or forgive me, and we know this doesn't apply to our Imam, you are extremely ignorant. Make a big claim like this. Just come and ask me whatever you want. Either you really know what you're talking about, or you're just way, way off. He said, Saluni qabla an tafqid. Come and ask your questions from me. And then the narration, because there's multiple narrations that are narrated for us. In some of them, he said, come and ask me because I am more familiar with the paths of the heavens than I am with the paths on earth. I have a different type of knowledge. And then he continues, he says, if you come and ask me about the Injil, I will respond to you based on the Injil. If you come and ask me based on the Torah, I will come and answer you based on the Torah. And if you ask me based on the Quran, I will answer you based on the Quran. But I will do it in such a way that these books will come to life and they will say, Sadaqa Aliyun. Ali is right. Ma kathib. He's not lying. Whatever he's saying is true. He's saying, I will answer in a way that these books will come to life for you. Ali ibn Abi Talib was open about this. Ahlul Bayt were open about this. We have a knowledge. There are wisdoms behind these Islamic rulings. Come and ask them. And of course, we know in history, people got up, asked silly questions. They weren't there to ask questions. They weren't there to learn from the knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt. But as it relates to our discussion, this was a claim Ahlul Bayt made very openly. So much so that years later, companion of the fifth Imam, Imam al-Baqir, salawatullahi alayhi, Zurara, famous Zurara ibn A'yan, he says, I was with the fifth Imam, he was a student of the fifth Imam and the sixth Imam, yes. He says, I was with the fifth Imam and I asked him, I said, your great-grandfather who used to say, Saluni amma shi'tum. Your great-grandfather who used to say, ask me about whatever issue it is that you want to know about. So he really said this? But what is your opinion about this? He said, yes, this is what my great-grandfather used to say. And then he turned to Zurara and he said, Zurara, let it be known that if people want true knowledge, they can go to the west and they can go to the east. But at the end of the day, true knowledge comes from here. And the narration says he was pointing at his house. So Ahlul Bayt were very open about this. We have this knowledge, number one. Number two, come and ask us. Saluni qabla an tafqiduni. Come and ask us these questions. They weren't ever in a position where they frowned upon. Why are you asking why? What is this question? No, questions were very important for Ahlul Bayt. So much so that they used to answer questions in situations that were very abnormal. In situations that you and I say, well, now's not the time for a question. Forget about this. The Battle of Jamal, very beautiful, piece of history. Yes, very important, I should say, piece of history. Very critical, has many theological implications. Many theological implications. The first time Muslimin went up against one another openly and publicly. Battle of Jamal was set. They were about to begin. On one side, the Imam and his companions. On the other hand, you had Talha, you had Zubayr, you had Aisha, now sitting on the camel. If you look at the Battle of Jamal, everything revolved around the camel. That's why it was called the Battle of Jamal. Everything is set. They're preparing for war. Before this battle begins, an Arabi comes, asks the Imam a question in the battlefield. And an Arabi is the one who was a Bedouin, didn't live in a town, used to travel, go this place, that place. Asked a question from the Imam. And the companions of the Imam said, what are you thinking? The battle is about to begin. What is this question you're asking? Now is not the time for questions. And Ali ibn Abi Talib responded to him with a very beautiful response. He told his companions to hold back because this man asked, I want to know about Tawheed. This Tawheed you speak of. Tell me more about it. Deeper knowledge. Yes? And Ali ibn Abi Talib said, I'll answer your question because this understanding of Tawheed is what us and them are fighting over. This is the whole point and the whole reason why we're in this battlefield. And the narration continues. The Imam says there's 4 types of Tawheed. 2 of them we believe in, 2 of them we don't believe in. Forget about frowning upon questions, yes? When people used to come to Ahlul Bayt with questions in very severe situations, you find that Ahlul Bayt were willing to answer. So much so that you find in our heritage and in our literature, followers of the Shia school of thought, you will come across books that compile a hadith in which the Imams were just answering why. Explaining the reason why you do this. Why zakat? Why khums? Why fasting? Why 5 times? Why this? Why that? These are compiled in books, thousands of ahadith, 2,000 to be specific, compiled in a book. For example, it's put together by a scholar, famous scholar of ours, by the name of Sheikh as-Saduq. Yes, a scholar of the 3rd, 4th century. Put this book together. It's called Ilal al-Shara'i', the reasons behind legislations. 2,000 ahadith roughly. What were these 2,000 ahadith? Just people coming and asking why. Yabna Rasulullah, why do we do this? Why do we do that? This was a very common occurrence amongst Ahlul Bayt. Yes, when they asked why, there was a particular perspective and approach they had in mind. Hold on to that thought. We're going to come to that. Because you and I ask why as well, but sometimes we're not asking it the right way. Hold on to that and we will come to that, inshallah. Let's have a salawat, please. These whys that we ask, of course, in order to understand better what Islam's take is on this issue, we have to understand the 2 different types of whys that we ask. There's the first type of why. Someone comes to you and says, brother, I saw you combine the prayers. Why do you combine the prayers? He's not asking for the wisdom, the philosophy, the science behind it. That's not what he's asking for. He says, where in Quran or Hadith does it say that you are allowed to do what? You're allowed to combine the prayer. It says, I saw you're praying. There's a turba you have in front of you. Why? Why is it you do sajda on this turba? Doesn't mean like, what's the wisdom? That's not what he's asking, yes? It says, what's the verse? What's the hadith? What's the proof that this is part of Islam? This is the first type of why. And there's a second type of why. No, he wants to figure out what's the wisdom behind it? What's the philosophy? You might ask yourself, you might say, I pray 5 times a day. Why 5 times? If salat is so wonderful, why not 21 times? Why is it when wudu, if I go upwards just a little bit on purpose, not accidentally, but on purpose, all of a sudden this wudu of mine, every Shia marja will tell you is batil all of a sudden. Why? What's the wisdom behind me having to go downwards, for example? Yes, I know the hadith. The hadith is there. Zurara asked the 6th Imam to do wudu. He did wudu. He says, Zurara says, I saw the Imam, I observed, he never went upwards. He's very particular about going downwards all the time. The hadith is there, but he's asking what's the wisdom behind it? What's the philosophy behind it? There's 2 different types of why. Let's start from the first one. The first type of why is, I just want to know, where in Quran or hadith does Islam say I have to do this? What's the proof that this is actually part of the teachings of Islam? Many times this question is a question between schools of thoughts. Yes, someone outside of your school of thought might raise it with regards to you. You might raise it with regards to them. Or no, sometimes you will see a particular practice. You want to make sure that this is actually part of Islam, not something that's being added to the religion. You ask why? Why do we have to do this? This type of why, are we supposed to ask this type of why? The answer is not only is it okay, number 2, you absolutely have to ask this question. You always have to ask this question. Why? Because if you don't ask this question, the lines between culture and religion start to get blurred. If there's a particular practice and you and I don't ask, where's the hadith, where's the verse of the Quran that says this is part of Islam? What happens over time? Over time, anyone comes, adds anything to the religion. But if you're constantly asking this question, what happens? You can differentiate between culture and religion. Culture and religion are not the same anymore. There's something that doesn't have a proof from the Quran and Hadith, you look at it, you say, no, this has no reasoning behind it. It's cultural, no problem. Islam doesn't have any major problem with culture. No, culture is there, it's not a problem. But at least you find out where are the limits of culture and where are the limits of religion, and you can separate these 2 from one another. If you don't ask this question of why, in terms of where in Quran or Hadith does it say we're supposed to be doing this, what happens is you will fall into either of these 2 categories, one or the other of these 2 categories. Either you'll become that type of Muslim that says everything is haram, or you'll become that type of Muslim that says everything is halal. Either you become one of those super conservative, really hardcore Muslims, anything you want to do, no, can't do this. Or you become one of those Muslims which is so easygoing, everything is halal in the religion. If you come from the Persian culture, the Iranian culture, you know exactly what I'm referring to. They'll say, you know what, as long as your heart is a good heart, doesn't matter what you do. It's good, it's fine. Everything is allowed. If you don't ask why, these are the 2 camps either you'll fall into. And you might say, oh, Sheikh, I have a life. What do you mean ask this why? I don't have time to ask this why every step of the way. Why this? Why that? It's a very good point. That's why someone asks this question on your behalf. That's a marja. Marja, every step of the way, says, wait a second. You're saying it's wajib. Let's see the reason for it. Says, this is halal. He says, okay, let's see the reason for it. What's the reason for it? Said, this is wajib. We have to do this. Said, what's the reason behind it? Why? When he says why, it doesn't mean the philosophy and the wisdom. He's saying where in Quran and Hadith. Your marja does that on your behalf. You want to separate culture from religion? It's very simple. You go to your marja. That's what your marja is doing for you. Your marja will tell you if you are getting together in a wedding and then the men and the women are mixing. Na'udhu billah, we hear in Muslim weddings now, na'udhu billah, there's intoxicants and so, things of that nature. This is Islam separating. So listen, that's just cultural practice or whatever it is. It's not okay with Islam. Your marja says this is haram. You can't do that. It's going too far. There are other things your marja will tell you it's mubah. It's okay, you want to do it, that's fine. So culture is not a problem. Everyone has their own culture. But you have to separate this religion from culture, and you do that by asking this why. I've told you before, you take a chocolate cake, give it to different cultures, they'll bake it in a different way. Yes. In the Iranian culture, you give them a chocolate cake. We're going to make a chocolate cake. It's supposed to be a chocolate cake. Somehow, some way, there are going to be some fruits, some dates, they will make their way into this chocolate cake. Somehow, some way. It's part of culture. And I can tell you, growing up in a Iranian household, you ask your mother, can we have chocolate cake? Absolutely, we can have chocolate cake. But all of a sudden, you see there's dates in there, there's fruits in there, there's everything in there. What happens? It's not how we eat chocolate cake here. It's culture. They give you a chocolate cake and say, we need you to bake a chocolate cake, for example. Yes? Somehow, some way, some masala, some curry, something is going to make its way into this chocolate cake. Yes? So say, well, this is a chocolate cake. It's not supposed to have this stuff. It's culture. Does some have a problem with it? No. This one makes chocolate cake like that. The other one makes chocolate cake like that. You give it to Lebanese, there will be za'atar in it somehow, some way. It's just different cultures. They have their different ways of doing things. Some doesn't have a problem. But Islam, if you ask this why, you can separate culture and religion from one another. Here's an important point to keep in mind. When you ask why, where in Islam does Islam say we have to do this? Please do not make this one mistake. And I see this happening all the time. That mistake is this. Do not ask, where is it in the Quran? There's so much that the Quran doesn't talk about. There's nothing to shy away from. There's so much that the Quran does not talk about. There's many details in our religion that the Quran does not talk about. People say, oh no, Sheikh, talk to me with the words of God. So did you pray today? Yes, of course I prayed. So how did you pray today? With Quran? Because Quran doesn't even tell you how you're supposed to pray. Quran doesn't say Takbiratul Ihram, doesn't say Surah Al-Fatiha, it doesn't say 2 sajdas. If it's up to the Quran, it just says you pray. So you believe in hadith then? No, when we want to see if something is part of Islam, there are multiple sources that we have to go to. Not show me in the Quran, where is it? It's not in the Quran, therefore it's not part of Islam. That's a very ignorant statement. I have to be careful. Good question, but I have to include in these sources hadith with it as well. And it gets complicated. That's why you have a marja to figure out these answers for you. This is the first type of why. Moving on to the second type of why. The second type of why is when I want to ask why, but I mean, what's the philosophy? What's the wisdom? Yes? What's the reason behind it? Sometimes we ask these questions. Say, why when I go to such that I have to have this turba? And sometimes we're looking for very interesting answers. Say, tell me how my energy connects with the earth, and then it connects with the other side of the world, and this type of stuff. The type of answers you can tell, our non-Muslim friend, and he can feel engaged with the religion. Yes. The second type of why, is it bad to ask these questions? No, absolutely not. But when you ask this question, you will find out that there are 4 different categories in Islamic rulings with regards to whether we know the reason behind them or not. First category are those rulings that you don't even have to ask why. They're so clear, you don't even need a reason behind them. Lying is haram in Islam. You don't need a reason behind it. Yes? If Muhammad asks why is lying haram in Islam, then we have a bigger problem. Yes? That's number one, first category of things. Maybe 10, 12, 15 rulings fall under this category. The reason why I'm mentioning these numbers is very important as I'm wrapping up. It's very important. 10, 15 rulings, backbiting is haram. You don't need a reason for that, yes? I don't know, deceiving other people, ripping off other people is haram. Okay, you understand the reason behind it. I have to tell you the reason behind it. Lying, I don't know, mocking others. Okay, this is the first category. Second category are those things that Islam has told us to do. Today, we understand a little bit better why Islam told us to do this. Like alcohol, consumption of alcohol. Islam told us not to do this. Now, today we understand the effects of it, how it impairs the judgment of the human being, how it can, threaten the lives of human beings. Thousands of people die every year. because of others who are intoxicated. Maybe back in the day it wasn't so clear. Nowadays we know the negative effects of alcohol and how it can turn into an addiction, so on and so forth. This is the second category. In this also, maybe 10, 12, 15, 20 rulings, for example. There's a third category, those issues or those rulings in Islam that Ahlul Bayt told us the reason for it. There are many in this as well. Okay. Then comes a fourth category. The fourth category are those, they're not clear by themselves. Science has not shed light on them. Ahlul Bayt have not happened to tell us also what is the reason behind them. And many of these are the detailed rulings in Islam. The details. And this fourth category is bigger than category 1, 2, and 3 put together. This salat that you pray, there's hundreds of detailed rulings in it that we don't know the reason behind it. We don't know what's the wisdom behind it. Why? Why does Takbiratul Ihram have to be first? Why not, I don't know, Ruku be first? Why is it when I do my wudu, it has to be like this? Why is it when I wake up for Fajr, the sun, if the tip of the sun shows itself a little bit, all of a sudden, all of the salat is not acceptable anymore? What? Why is it Maghrib, the redness has to come and all that kind of stuff? I can't pray before. I want to be early. Can I pray before? Say, no, you can't pray before. So it just doesn't make sense. You look at inheritance, for example, in Islam, all these details. This one gets 1/3, this one gets 1/6, this one 1/8. Do we know the reasons behind these? No, 90% of them, we don't know the reasons behind. Yes, the general concepts, we know the reasons. Praying is a good thing. You connect with your God. We understand that. The details, we don't know. Why not 4 times? Why not 6 times? Only 5? Every single act of worship that we do consists of thousands of these detailed Islamic rulings that we don't know the reason behind them. And because of that, brothers and sisters, if anyone ever approaches Islam with this approach, that they ask why, but deep down what they're thinking is either I find out the reason for it or I'm not going to practice it. This person, I'll say this loud and clear, this person who approaches Islam with this mindset will never be able to practice the religion of Islam. They will never be able to. Because Islam inherently in it, there are thousands of detailed rulings that we don't know the reason behind them. And science has not told us the reason behind them. And Ahlul Bayt have not told us the reason behind them. This is a battle you will never be able to win. If for every detailed thing you want to know the reason behind it, no. In Islam, and Islam is 100% open about this. Thousands of rulings, we don't know the reason behind it. And this is one of the biggest mistakes parents make with their children. When they're raising the child, say, we have to pray. Why do we have to pray? Oh, we have to come up with a reason now. It's exercise for you. We have to pray 5 times a day. It's exercise for you. Says, Baba, why two rakat in the morning? Why not 2 rakat in that? Says, well, in the morning, these types of reasons that we come up with, in the morning, you're tired a little bit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to warm you up to the day. But Dhuhr, Asr, you're already awake. And these reasons that we come up with. If you follow down this road, inevitably, you're going to hit a point where you don't even know the reason behind what you're doing. Say, but Sheikh, I thought Islam is not blind faith. Who said it's blind faith? It's not blind faith at all. In Islam, you have fundamentals that you know the reason behind them. Yes, the details, no. Many of them, we don't know the reason behind them. Parents many times get hesitant when we come to this part of the discussion. Say, but I told my child Islam is a very logical, religion. It is a logical religion. We may not know all the details behind them. And it almost seems as though Islam on purpose does not want to tell you the detailed rulings why you are doing every single one of them. It's almost on purpose. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to tell you and I, He could have. He could have. He has all this knowledge, yes? Didn't Ali ibn Abi Talib sit on the minbar and say, Saluni qabla an tafqiduni, ask me before you lose me? We have 12 imams. Couldn't they have told us? Yes, they could have told us. Okay, nobody asked them at that time. Didn't they know we're coming up afterwards? Didn't they know their Shia were going to show up later on? Of course they knew. Yes, they told us about their Shia. So then why did they not share the reasons behind all of these detailed rulings in Islam? Wouldn't have that made faith so much easier? Wouldn't it have been so much easier for to say, I'm a Muslim, and this non-Muslim friend of yours asks you, pray 5 times a day. Why do you pray 5 times a day? You say, because of this reason. So, wow. Why do you have to pray before the sun shows up? Because of this reason. Done. So easy. Would have made life so much easier. Why is it that Islam did not take that step and tell us? And as we will explain tomorrow, if Islam were to tell you the reason behind every command that it has in the religion, it would no longer be a religion. It would fundamentally go against Islam being a religion. Why and how? Inshallah, that we will leave for tomorrow night. There are 2 reasons why, in my humble opinion, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on purpose, many of these rulings, He has not told us the reasons behind them. Some of them He has, of course, yes, but many of them, the detailed ones, He has not told us. That inshallah we will leave for tomorrow night. If we can dim the lights and take our hearts to the city of Medina. These days and nights that we are going through, brothers and sisters, are difficult days and nights for the Ahlul Bayt. These are days and nights in which the Gharib Imam of ours, our beloved 4th Imam, he is leaving this world in the city of Medina. The city of Medina is no longer the same city it was when the Prophet was alive. The city of Medina has changed so much. When the Prophet was alive, the Ahlul Bayt, they were honored. This Ahlul Bayt, they were respected. This Ahlul Bayt, they were shown so much love and affection. Now this Ahlul Bayt, they walk in the city of Medina. It's almost as if no one shows any respect. It's almost as if no one shows any love and affection to Imam as-Sajjad. Imagine this life of the 4th Imam. Every step of it has its own masa'ib. This is Imam as-Sajjad, who witnessed all of the things that he witnessed on the 10th of Muharram. But his masa'ib did not end there. His difficulties did not end there. Then he had to make his way through the deserts of Iraq and the deserts of Syria, going all the way to the city of Kufa. Then from there, going all the way through the masa'ib of Sham. So much so that when they asked Imam as-Sajjad, they said, what part of this trip was the most difficult part? He said 3 times, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham, Ash-Sham. Sham was the most difficult part. The disrespect that they showed towards the Ahlul Bayt, the way they paraded us through the city, the way they were throwing rocks at the family of the Ahlul Bayt. This was so difficult and painful for us to witness. Imam as-Sajjad will tell you. Then even when they came back to Medina, you find the Imam is gharib. Yes, you find al-Banin goes and sits and she mourns the death and the martyrdom of her children. And they say even strangers used to come and sit and they used to cry at the masa'ib of al-Banin. Imam as-Sajjad, his life has now come to an end. Imagine how lonely of a life, how gharib of a life the life of the 4th Imam is. Those final moments have come and he has now left this world. There's one narration that describes for us what Imam al-Baqir went through when he saw the body of his father, Imam as-Sajjad. The narrator says Imam as-Sajjad had left this world. They brought his body, they placed it on a stone, they set up a curtain, and they had the body of the Imam behind the curtain. They started to prepare the body for the body to be washed. He says Imam al-Baqir was on the other side. I was on this side of the curtain. No one else could see this body of Imam as-Sajjad. He says, as Imam al-Baqir started to remove the clothes of the body of Imam as-Sajjad to prepare for his ghusl, to prepare for his kafan, he says, all of a sudden I heard from the other side of the curtain that Imam al-Baqir started to cry, and he started to cry heavily. And he cried and cried until he finally got himself under control. He washed the body of Imam as-Sajjad. This body was buried in the city of Medina. The narrator says, a couple of days later, I saw Imam al-Baqir, and I asked Imam al-Baqir, I said, Yabna Rasulullah, when you were removing the clothing from the body of Imam as-Sajjad, I heard you crying and crying heavily. Can you tell me why it is that you started to cry so heavily? Did you start to miss your father? Is that what made you cry so heavily? He tells the narrator, he said, no, the reason why I cried so heavily is as I moved the clothing of my father, I started to see the marks that the chains had left on the body of my father. This father of mine, he was dragged from Karbala all the way to Kufa, from Kufa all the way to Syria, with all of these women and all of these children. There were chains on his neck. There were chains on his arms. They forced him in these lands and in these deserts. And the heat was so much that these chains left marks on the body of my father. The moment I saw these marks on the body of my father, I could not hold back anymore. And I started to cry heavily. I tell you, brothers and sisters, this is what happened after Karbala. But in Karbala, it wasn't about marks that were left on the bodies of the Shuhada. In Karbala, bodies would go to the battlefield, they would come back in pieces. These bodies would come back without any heads at some times. This was the Masa'ib of Ali al-Akbar. What happened to the body of Ali al-Akbar on the 10th of Muharram? The Masa'ib of Ali al-Akbar is such a difficult one to recite. Imagine those moments when the son of Hussein makes his way towards the tent of Abu Abdullah. Imagine Hussein starts to hear the footsteps of Ali al-Akbar coming into the tent. And the narration says the moment Hussein saw his son, he quickly gave him permission because he wanted to tell Ali al-Akbar, Ya Ali, it's too difficult for me to sit there and witness you in front of me. Don't stand there. I can't bear this pain of watching you in front of me. The narration says he came into the tent. Quickly, Hussein gave him permission. Ya Ali, go quickly. I can't bear these moments. But before you go to the tent of the women and the children. Say your goodbye and say your farewell to the women and the children. The narration says Ali al-Akbar came into the tent of the women and the children. The narration, the wording of it says, the moment Ali came into this tent, all of these women and children, they gathered around Ali al-Akbar. They surrounded Ali al-Akbar. And one narration says they started to pull on the clothing of Ali. Imagine these little children. They started to pull on the clothing of Ali al-Akbar. And some of them said, Irham ghurbatana. Have mercy on us. Why would you leave us in the middle of nowhere? Why would you leave us in the land of ghurba? And Ali has to head out of this tent. He goes towards the battlefield. He is fighting bravely until at one point he becomes thirsty and he starts to make his way back to the tent of Abu Abdullah. And Hussein sees his son coming back. What happened to the heart of Hussein? What pain went through the heart of this father? Seeing his son going back and forth, he came back to Hussein. He said, Father, هل إلى شربة من ماء من سبيل? Is there any bit of water left in these tents? And Hussein said, Ali, why would you tear my heart apart like that? Go back to the battlefield very quickly. Your grandfather, he will quench your thirst. Imagine as Ali al-Akbar is walking away. Imagine the tears that are falling from the eyes of this father. One narration says Hussein looked at Ali al-Akbar. He was so hopeless this time when he looked at Ali al-Akbar. And he called out to Umar ibn Sa'd. He said, May Allah put this pain in your heart that you are putting in my heart today. And Ali al-Akbar goes to the battlefield for the final time until that point comes where he is struck on the head. And he fell from this horse and he called out, Ya Abatah, my father, come to my aid and assistance. The narration says Hussein ran through the plains of Karbala. He rushed through the plains of Karbala. The dust now settles, and the narration says that Hussein placed his face on the face of Ali al-Akbar. And he said, Ya Ali, ala dunya ba'daka al-afa. I don't want this word after you. There's worth nothing to me after you. Imagine the pain of a father as he sits by the body of his son. And in those final moments, Hussein said this one line. He said, Ya Ali, amma ant faqad istarahta min hammi dunya. Ya Ali, you have left this world and you have left the difficulties of this world. فَقَدْ بَقِيَ أَبُوكَ, but you left behind an old father of yours. This father of yours has to go through so many more masa'ib on this day. As Hussein now asked for help, to bring the body of Ali al-Akbar and to slowly move the body of Ali al-Akbar all the way to the back of the tents. Allah la'natullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the tawfiq and the opportunity to be amongst the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt, inshaAllah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who are going through difficulty, all of those who are going through pain, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liberates them from their difficulties, inshaAllah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of the brothers and sisters in different Muslim countries, in Palestine, in China, in Afghanistan, with all these developments, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He eases their lives, inshaAllah. And finally, last but not least, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He hastens the return of our beloved 12th Imam bin Nabi wa alih, rahimallahu man qara'a surat al-Fatiha ma'a salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Ya Hussein, 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 Ya. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, will follow. I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, will follow. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. My grief started when I lost mankind's true mercy. After that loss, I lost Zahra and then Ali. The broken rib, the struck head of Ali haunts me. My grief deepens, seeing Hassan dying slowly. How can I live without you now, my dear? How can I see your head shine on a spear? How can I live without you now, my dear? How can I see your head shine on a spear? I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, will follow. I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, will follow. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. My heart was shattered on the day Hussein was killed. The day of 10th when the whole world with blood was filled. Upon my mind sorrow and pain was instilled. Oh Lord, let our small sacrifice be now fulfilled. Oh Shia, when you're thirsty, say his name. Oh Shia, curse the one who lit the flame. Oh Shia, when you're thirsty, say his name. Oh Shia, curse the one who lit the flame. I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, will follow. I am the mother of sorrows. Wherever I go, will follow. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. My life ended when I was taken back to Sham. When on a plate I saw the head of my imam, I kept dropping my precious tears upon my palm. And now I lay under the ground where I am calm. My soul rests, but my tears are still dropping. My soul rests, and in Sham I'm now laying. My soul rests, but my tears are still dropping. My soul rests, and in Sham I'm now laying. I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go, hope follows. I am the mother of sorrows, wherever I go, hope follows. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. I'm Zainab. All my life I lived in pain. I'm Zainab. I died when I lost Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Salatu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت